Well, unfortunately, it did not take long. As you may well know or may not know, just a couple of days, in fact, on Sunday, I recorded a video talking about how, in many of these reform councils, one of the first acts they decided to do was get rid of the flood committees. These were committees dedicated to not only talking about flooding, how to prevent it, if flooding does happen, what is the response, and of course the afterwards. How was the response? How was it handled? Was there anything next time they could do better? This brought agencies from all over the different council areas, even people from outside the council, into this committee to have a seat at the table to talk about this. These were really important committees that were decided to be set up because the issue of flooding affects thousands of people up and down this country. And yet these Reform UK councils thought, nah, we're going to get rid of these committees and just slide it under, the environmental committee, and maybe we'll allow the environmental committee maybe an extra 1 or 2 meetings a year. That's, of course, if you were lucky. Meanwhile, of course, it is inescapable to just look out your window at the moment. We have already had our first lot of very serious rainfall of the year, and that is not going to be the last. And guess what? Guess what that has resulted in? Shock horror, flooding. So it was not the most difficult call to make, to know that when this started to happen, Reform UK people would ultimately do what Reform UK people would do, or at least these councillors would do. And of course, there is no better or even finer example than, of course, Councillor George Finch, the guy, of course, in charge of Warwickshire Council. So, what has he been up to recently to do all this? Well, as you may know, there was a bit of flooding in the area, in the area of Warrington, and of course, George Finch made a video. He made a video, believe it or not, proclaiming to people, "Don't worry, don't worry. I and my fellow Reform UK councillors are going to be here for you. Why? On Monday, we're going to be marching straight into that council hall, holding an emergency council meeting to immediately authorize roughly around, I think it was £2.3 million worth of, no, sorry, £1.1 million worth. Let's get it right, let's get it right, of new flood defence being arranged for Warwickshire. Which, again, you might think, gee, isn't that George Finch guy doing his job? Saying that and, proclaiming that, saying, these Reform UK people are going to actually maybe so far, for once in 7 months since they've been elected, maybe actually do their job. Now, let's not be too silly here. Because Reform UK councillors, actually doing their job would mean, well, them actually doing their job. So, of course, what happened? Well, here we are, of course, sitting here on Wednesday, and has Warwickshire County Council announced this £1.2 million worth of new flood defence money for this area that was flooded. I can already see the answers on your face. The answer was no. This has, of course, not been authorized at all. And here we have, of course, going over to Twitter, of course, Councillor Conductor saying it right here. Dear George Finch, you seem to have made at least a massive mistake and, of course, accidentally sat in a Reform press conference in Westminster for over an hour at 11 a.m. Meanwhile, remember, George Finch proudly proclaimed in this video that he would be marching in with his fellow Reform councillors to get this money approved in an emergency meeting of the council first thing Monday morning. Instead, what does he go and do? what does he go and do? Well, as was said there must have been clearly some accident. You know, surely he accidentally tripped on a piece of litter, clearly, and just happened to find himself tumbling onto a train headed down to London, and then just continued to just make fall after tumble after comedic fall, where he ends up, shock horror, accidentally in a Reform UK press conference along with Richard Tice. No, no one's going to believe that story, quite frankly, in a month of Sundays. No, because just like many of these Reform councillors, and George Finch, bear in mind, is no exception on this, they don't care about their job. They don't really care about, you know, looking after these areas. They were just told, hey, here's a thing, stand for it, and, you know, oh, now you're elected. Well, at least I suppose he's getting paid, which I suppose is very little comfort to the people, of course, of Warwickshire. Now, of course, with more flooding rolling around. But George Finch's ridiculous, of course, does not stop there, because now, like many Reform leaders of their local council, George Finch has to now say, sorry, guys, but yeah, we have to now take down your flags. You know, all those flags that they were all very happy to put up over the summer. Just go for it, put them up. Well, now he has graciously given his permission for the other councils in Warwickshire beneath the county council level to start removing those flags. Why? Well, here's the thing. Christmas decorations, of course, have got to go up, and those flags are, of course, obstructing those, Christmas decorations. So now George Finch has to do a video instead, saying, "Guys, please can you take those flags down, and don't worry, we've got a special recycling scheme for you, because if they're taken down, they'll be given to your local Reform UK councillor that you can then reclaim them in the new year." Bear in mind, this cost of removing these flags, as we all know, costs money. Now, one, of course, you know, it's still money, but it's still, you know, couple of £100. Of course, when you have to remove multiple flags, that's where it starts going from the hundreds into the thousands. And quite frankly, one of the things I want to see councillors go for, because this is going for the jugular now, start asking what this cost of flag removal in total is going to be. And then you should ask these, you know, Reform councillors, was this money worth it when they are going to be encouraging these flags to go up once again in the new year, which again, they're going to have to be taken down. And for a council, or at least a party that continues talking about the fact of we are fighting against wasting money, I can't think of a bigger waste of money than what has been described here in this case as being the single worst idea of fiscal responsibility of a flag recycling scheme now for the terminally dense. But again, this is Reform UK. This is once again Reform UK at its worst, really. And George Finch once again takes the cake here. But trust me, this isn't going to be the last story where we get these Reform people all of a sudden declaring how much they really care about flooding, even though they've got rid of these flood defense committees, and saying, we're going to do this. And then, of course, proceed not to do anything about it. Because doing something about it would mean doing their job. And if there's anything I have learned from following all these reform councils for the past couple of months, a reform councillor doing their job, well, it's as likely as snow in Hawaii. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.